Right.
Yep. Okay. Okay, the time is 7 o'clock and we are recording and the pipes are steaming and okay, this is the regular meeting of the Silverton Board of Trustees. It is January 22nd. Shall we start with roll call?
Trustee Edwards?
Here.
Trustee Franker?
Here.
Trustee Harper?
Here.
Trustee Burma?
Here.
Trustee George?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Here.
Mayor Furman is absent this evening.
Okay, do we have any staff or board revisions to the agenda?
We do not. Couple minor edits, but we'll point them out as we go.
Okay, perfect. Then we'll open it up for public comment. If you would like to make a comment this evening, introduce yourself and you will have 3 minutes to speak. We do have some people here in person. Would anyone in person like to start with a comment? Evan? Yeah. Okay, yeah, come on up. Start with in-person comments and I just need to.
My name is Evan Harris.
We're going.
I noticed that wetlands is up for discussion again on the packet, and so that's a hefty packet, but I tried to read through it. And I just want to reiterate my desire to see town prioritize natural resources, especially those that are finite and cannot be rebuilt. I know that there's it butts heads with things like building housing. And that is where I can see like needing to get creative because like we can build more houses, but like we can't rebuild things that are destroyed and depleted, or at least it's very, very, very difficult and sometimes not even worth it as we've heard. So I just wanted to reiterate that I very much would love to see prioritization continue of wetlands and natural resources in Silverton.
Yeah.
That's all.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to make an in-person comment? Okay. Anyone on Zoom who would like to make a comment this evening? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to presentations and proclamations.
None tonight.
And item 4, new business. 4A, resolution 2024-01. A resolution authorizing the town of Silverton to join with other local governments as a participant in the Colorado Local Government Liquid Asset Trust to pool funds for investment.
All right, so the Finance Committee met last week to discuss reopening our Colo Trust account and using it to gain interest on funds collected in the summer months when we need them in the winter months. So when I first started in an attempt to organize our finances, I consolidated our 7 bank accounts, and now I'm looking for ways to earn revenue. Investing in local government specific trust with unlimited withdrawals was recommended by our new accountant and was supported by the Finance Committee. There were a couple administrative edits to the resolutions that have since been corrected. Hopefully, all of them.
Okay. Is there any, would the Finance Committee like to just give us a little input on that or?
This seemed pretty straightforward to us. I mean, it was a big financial packet to look through, and as like trustees of the public funds, that was important to do. But this was an account we used to have, and it basically is a way for the town at a pretty low risk. I mean, obviously all investments carry risk, but it was a way for the town to take surplus funding that we might have in the summer, put it in an interest-bearing account that is only reserved for municipalities and counties, and have it earn interest when we're not using it, and manage the money that way. It's a little bit more time consuming for staff because they have to kind of keep the balances of each account, right? So if we put in the interest bearing account and then we need to spend on expenses during the winter, and the team would have to move money around, but staff recommended it and it seemed reasonable.
I mean, with interest rates being what they are right now, I think make good use of that.
Yeah, on the flip side of it, instead of on the.
Yeah, on the hurt
Side
side
of
of it.
Right. Yeah, the memo says, for example, if we have 250,000 in the account, it has the potential to earn around 13,000 a year. So would someone like to make a motion to adopt resolution 2024-01, a resolution authorizing the town of Silverton to join with other local governments as a participant in the Colorado Local Government Liquid Asset Trust, the trust, to pool funds for investment?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Trustee Edwards?
Yes.
Trustee Kränker?
Yes.
Trustee Harper?
Yes.
Trustee Grandma?
Yes.
Trustee George?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Yes. Okay, thanks. We'll move on to item 4B, request for qualifications, preliminary engineering services for wastewater treatment system improvements.
And we received a grant from CDPHE in December to fund half the cost to hire an engineer firm to give us the preliminary scope and scale designs for the new wastewater treatment plant. This will give us a better idea of how much the new plant will cost us and give us a number to apply for grant funding with. John is also on the line if you have any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for John?
I do not.
Okay. I like the sentence in the memo that says the timeline for such an undertaking is 3 to 5 years. We're in year 1. So this will be something that unfolds over the next coming years, which is really exciting. Would someone like to make a motion to release the request for qualifications for the preliminary engineering services for the wastewater treatment system improvements?
So moved.
Second.
Thanks. Roll call, please.
Trustee Edwards?
Yes.
Trustee Kränker?
Yes.
Trustee Harper?
Yes.
Trustee Grandma?
Yes.
Trustee George?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Yes. Okay. Moving on, item 4C, special event reschedule for the dog sled race.
Right, we do have Nathan on to walk you through this. We did pull this out because we do have a question for you all on administrative process. So go ahead, Nathan.
So unfortunately, due to early season snow conditions, we were unable to host 2 of our events as originally scheduled. The ski race being one of them, but the Rocky Mountain Sled Dog Race did have to push until March 2nd through 3rd. The reason that we put this as new business is currently the process for any special event changes to the size or scope of events is to come back before the Board of Trustees in order to get the re-approval of those applications. We are asking for the approval, the current approval, to move the Rocky Mountain Sled Dog Race to the 2nd and 3rd of March, where we're hoping to have more snow. And we are also requesting a motion authorizing staff to administratively approve any changes to an approved special event application regarding event dates. So we have 2 motions before you with this event. Nothing's changing with the size or scope. It's just the date of the event that we need to approve.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Nathan, because that was exactly the thought I had when we were working together on this is, would it be possible for it to be administratively approved? So you are on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll need a motion first to approve or deny the date changes for the Silverton ski race and the flying sled dog races, special event applications. And I kind of phrase that in a way because I don't want someone to feel like I'm forcing you to make a particular motion. You'll have to approve it or deny it.
Okay, motion to approve the date changes for Silverton ski race and the flying sled dog races special event applications.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, roll call for the first motion.
Trustee Edwards?
Yes.
Trustee Kränker?
Yeah.
Trustee Harper?
Yes.
Trustee Grandma,
Yes.
trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Yes. Okay, and then the second motion associated with these changes is to approve authorizing staff to administratively approve changes to approved special event application event dates.
You should say so moved.
I tried to say.
Let's do that.
Second.
Okay, roll call. That was Jim and second by Dana.
All right, trustee Edwards.
Yes.
Trustee Franker.
Yes.
Trustee Harper.
Yes.
Trustee Grandma,
Yes.
trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Yes.
Look at that efficiency we're gaining.
All right, let's move on to consent agenda. There are several special event notices in the consent agenda with new events. So the snowscape, February 9th to 11th, whiteout, February 2nd to 3rd, banked slalom, February 24th. That's a stacked month.
Exciting.
Yes, February is our busiest month for winter events. As Mayor Pro Tem Barney had mentioned, the first weekend of February will be the Silverton Whiteout. They are coming back, and there will be no changes compared to last year's event. I have asked them to reach out specifically to EMS Director Tyler George in that capacity for a plan. Unfortunately, as of this meeting, I have not heard back from that event on all of the requisites that I'm requesting. The second weekend is our Silverton Snowscapes. Illuminate the Future will be the theme, and I'm hoping to see many cardboard box derby sleds decked out in their most futuristic ideas of what that could be. Bright colors are encouraged during our night ski as well. We have multiple events that we are working with local organizations to come up with and finalize the snowscape model, as we call it. And for the third weekend, we are still in the process of working with Silverton Ski Joring to finalize some details before I bring that before the board as a formality, since we have an approved contract. And finally is the Silverton Bank Slalom, which is Corey Smith with Idorado Media LLC that is putting that on again. It is a wonderful event that has just grown in popularity over at Kendall Mountain. So I plan on not having any sleep over the next month. So if anyone is absolutely willing to volunteer for any of these events, including the town events, I would greatly appreciate that. And it's a great way to benefit your community. I am asking for a few items. With the whiteout, we are doing a public rights-of-way closure in front of the Avon on 10th Street so they can start and finish the race. For the Snowscapes event, we are asking for a fireworks permit application. The fire department has agreed to put on another fireworks show for us, so we are super excited for that. Bank Slalom will be held over at Kendall, so there's no additional permits, and they are going to actually break out into the community for some of their events, so there's very little for me to do. I want to say that I appreciate all the event organizers, and I'm looking forward to this month of no sleep and super excitement. And if anyone has any questions for me, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Thanks, Nathan. Any questions, Nathan?
I was saying it's super great that we just have this momentum with all these events, the historic events, any new events. So really exciting. From whiteout to ski joring to snowscape is just fun to see it. I know the community looks forward to it. Being on the chamber board, I've definitely heard from businesses that it's a very busy month for them. So finding additional ways for folks to come and stay and enjoy the community is just so great.
Nathan, the snowscape event, is that a town sponsored event? Or you said you were
Yes.
collaborating with other organizations?
It is
Should we
a
give
town
them a shout
sponsored
out?
event, and I am scheduled to have some meetings with Silverton Strong. Trustee Cranker is going to meet with me to see if we can bring back broomball. Fingers crossed, that's one of my favorite events to watch. I am also going to work with the Silverton Creative District so we can bring back the Cardboard Box Derby Sled Workshop. So if you have cardboard, and this is a plea to the community, if you have cardboard, please give me a call. We could use all the cardboard. The thicker the box, the better they last, the better chance the kiddos have at making it down the sled hill without breaking apart and crashing. And we are also going to be hoping for an adult category. They do have to be made out of cardboard. There will be no wood, bolts, metal, anything like that this year. So cardboard is highly encouraged for adults as well, and we need all the support we can get with that.
Well,
Okay,
and I put a shout out to the community. I mean, this could be a little friendly competition among some local businesses. You could have a Silverton Mountain sled. You could have an elevated coffee bear sled. I'm just saying, you could have some adult sleds that really bring
Yeah.
the stoke.
Yeah. All right.
So get
I
inspired.
am thinking a trustee category would be amazing as well.
Right back at ya.
Trustee versus
Maybe if
staff.
you're running for a new position,
That's the campaign strategy.
that's a campaign.
Whoever wins,
Yeah.
it's a sign.
Okay. All right. We should move on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. Thanks for the elaborating. Is there anything else on the consent agenda that we need to make note of? Would someone like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda items?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, thanks. Roll call, please.
Trustee Edwards.
Yes.
Yes.
Trustee Harper.
Yes.
Trustee Birma.
Yes.
Trustee George.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Yes. Okay, thanks. Moving on, staff reports.
All right, so we did have a hiccup with our Mullis merchant account. It was compromised at the beginning of the year and we're finally able to fix it. Reservations went live on Saturday. And Nathan, Sarah, and Jennifer have worked tirelessly to make sure we accommodate everyone who wanted to book. I was receiving all of the receipts all weekend, so we did receive over 250 reservations on Saturday. And yeah, it's still high in demand. So night skiing was a great success on Saturday as well. So it was warm, good snow, and thanks for everyone that made that happen. Annexation of Anvil will be going before the county commissioners this week, and then a petition will be circulating the next couple of weeks. So looking into
That's a huge deal.
yeah. Our learning session for the code rewrite will be on January 31st at 6 p.m. You can join via Zoom or YouTube. This will be on our overlays and zoning. So this will be the second of 6 learning sessions that we'll have this winter. The goal of these learning sessions is to learn more about land use and development as a community, so that we all have a shared language to operate from as we navigate the code rewrite this spring and summer. So all of these sessions will be on our YouTube. So if you don't make it that night at 6 o'clock, you'll be able to tune back in whenever. Or when it comes up with the code rewrite and you say, oh, what are overlay districts? And you can go look up that learning session.
Can I make
And-
a quick plug on that learning session for folks? Because it was such a short, nice, sweet. Staff did a great job on just helping people get up to speed. So if you know nothing about code, you have no idea what's going on, or even if you have a little bit of interest, it's a super excellent resource to tune into live or later.
And we're getting a lot of traction from planners from across the state that want to join us. So we were told we had the dream team of planners for this next one, so tune in.
It's gonna be a really good one.
They're all really excited to work together too. It's really fun. And then we do have 4.5 meetings left with this board. So wanted to put that out there. If there are things that you all want to see on the agenda, prioritized, please let me know sooner rather than later so that staff can start working on those.
Free for all. Okay. I won't do it. Gloria, what are the chances in the Anvil annexation process that happens in time for people to vote in the April election?
We're working on that right now. I do have a question out to Clayton on if we can get it done by the end of February, if they would be able to vote. So stay tuned on that one. We're trying to figure that out.
And
And then,
ballots.
speaking of elections.
Speaking of elections, ballots for in-town folks won't start going out until February the 16th. So if we could get it around that time, I think that would work. We had 8 trustee petitions returned today and 3 mayor petitions returned today. So it's a solid looking ballot so far.
Nice.
And on the next meeting, we'll be asking you all to help with the order of the candidates. So that will be presented at the next meeting.
I'll be drawing the names out of a hat.
Yeah. And it will be public.
Yes.
All right.
It's not helping, but
Well, just
watching.
witnessing.
We can make some drama around it or something.
Yeah.
All right. So anything else on staff reports?
Not unless you all have questions.
It's a long list. It's a lot going on. Was not a question, it was just a statement.
Observation. Nice. Okay, committee and board reports. We'll start with the finance committee meeting. Finance committee? Gosh.
Hey, Jim, what did we talk about?
Go for it.
Okay, we had a couple, actually, we did have a meaty discussion. So the first topic of the finance committee agenda was related to if a developer puts in certain infrastructure in a block, how the town or the developer manages recouping costs from future property owners, right? So let's say a private individual or a developer that's developing multiple plots puts in a sewer. Currently, we have language where in our code where the developer can get reimbursed for like the cost of putting that in if someone's then tapping in. But it's not super clear in our processes how we actually manage how that happens. So we had a pretty robust discussion. We didn't really come to a conclusion of where we were going with that. But I think it did kind of raise some of these larger questions about development in town, infrastructure in town, how does it get paid for or reimbursed, who pays for it up front, who might pay for it down the line. So again, no conclusion, but that was the topic of conversation. There was a great memo from CPS in the finance committee packet. You can find that online if you'd really like to dive in. Was there anything else on that, Gloria, or Jim, that we?
No, I was giving you all a heads up that that's something we've been really working on, John and I, and we actually made headway on it today, so we're very excited.
Great.
Well, not very, but we're happy about it.
Great. We talked a lot about the EQR rates for the refuse fund. So if anybody tuned into our budget discussions or has paid attention, our refuse fund is not sustainable. So basically the amount that all of us as customers pay for refuse is not equal to the amount that we pay our contractor to transfer and collect all of the trash to get it out of town. So we've talked a lot about this over, I don't know, Tyler and Jim, 18 months, 2 years. I mean, it's been going on for a while. And so we finally kind of came to some resolution about where we could go with the rates and make this fund both sustainable and try to make the rates as equitable as possible across commercial and residential. So that was really fruitful. And it was just clear in some of our systems that we hadn't implemented kind of equal rates across the board. So really just kind of cleaning house to make sure that it's consistent and it's in line with sort of quantity of trash generated, right? And just kind of a clarification piece out there for the public. So I know there was a lot of confusion among businesses because a variety of businesses and some residential units pay for trash collection, either through the dumpster or through a trash receptacle. And so they pay directly to Bruin. They're paying that fee to cover the cost of renting that receptacle or the dumpster and the cost for the truck to pick up that trash and take it to the transfer station. But what that fee does not include is transferring the trash that goes into the dumpster at the transfer station out of Silverton. So we just kind of talked a lot about how to make sure that all the costs for that utility are covered by all of us as users using the service. Yeah, Jim, you had great thoughts from your history on this. Anything else you wanted to?
I've been
add?
forgetting everything tonight. We discussed with regards to the refuge fund, with these steps, with these measures being put in place, that within 1 to 5 years, being able to get really close to breaking even, and that's the goal. So as not to essentially rob Peter to pay Paul, this will pay for itself and therefore be a standalone entity that won't have to be feeding off these other accounts. And we think within 1 to 5 years, we can do that.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah, and it was some great work put in by staff to kind of get us there and find something. It's not going to be perfect for everybody, but it's the best we can get for kind of being equal across the board for the variety of businesses. And it takes into the nuance of, are you a retail store versus are you a restaurant or are you a hotel? So trying to kind of make sure we're accounting for the different nuance of businesses we have. So for everybody getting their bills, there will be new rate changes. So that is taken into effect on a couple levels. One, we already implemented the water and sewer rates that we had been approved back in 2017, and that's for water and sewer. And then second, the refuse rates will be changing and those are going out or went out, right, Melina?
Well, they won't be changing. We'll be presenting that at the next meeting in February.
And
to
the
you all.
residential rate will be changing.
Yeah,
Just-
residential rate is not changing. Yeah, so that was refuse. And then we talked about the Colorado Trust, which we already addressed earlier. I think that was it.
Tyler, Jim?
Talked about the dump truck.
Financing or.
Talk about that. But really just jumping back into the refuge fund, what was discussed and what we've talked about here is making the refuge fund work for the citizens of Silverton. And I know Dana just said, hey, for everyone paying their fair share, but knowing inflation, knowing the cost of living is going up, and it's hurting everyone. So how do we make this work while not impacting our local families?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really looking at the pay scale for businesses that are seeing those tourism dollars coming in and then kind of deflect that. So not putting the burden on our locals. And that's big.
Thanks.
Thanks, Finance Committee, Chamber of Commerce.
That got rescheduled to this week.
Okay, we'll hear about that next time. Planning Commission. That's me. Planning Commission met on the 16th and went through some housekeeping, and then reviewed 3 improvement permit applications. The first one is the Richard Smiley DBA Silverton Glamping. So this one, I think there are a lot of surrounding property owners who receive notifications, and this is a proposal for a summertime only camping experience along the Animas River that would involve takedown structures because it's in an avalanche zone, a floodplain. I mean, it kind of has like a pretty healthy mix of all the overlays. And so the property owners are considering what is possible on that property. And I think what they proposed, my personal opinion on this is it's a really cool idea. And I think they have I think it's a really good way to leverage the property in a way that contributes to the community, is fairly low impact, works within the constraints. I think that there will probably be some public opinion on the visual look of or visual impact of the domes. So I've had a little bit of feedback about that, and I think it's just because it looks sort of different than anything around, so people will probably have an opinion about it. People have opinions. The next permit application we heard from was Adam and Spencer Rex, Kendall Mountain House. That is for a cabin up on Kendall Mountain, and we had reviewed this application before. This was kind of a second pass at it. It includes a vacation rental permit. And they were requesting that their square footage be increased to 3,900 square feet simply because of like a rearrangement of the layout. So they were adding a loft, the footprint didn't change. And that was recommended for approval. Sorry, I should have mentioned that the Planning Commission had some feedback for glamping, but was ultimately recommended that it move on to the next stage in the process. Finally, we heard an application from Charles and Bruce Hoke on the Gladstone Girl. This is another cabin proposed development of single-family dwelling on the Minnehaha Road. And this is like 1,000 square feet, little cabin up there in Minnehaha. And that was recommended for approval. That was a sketch plan as well. And just to note, the county does have a total of 20 vacation rental permits, and so far 14 or 15 have been claimed. So that's
That's
the update.
capped at 20. That's
Capped at 20 in the
number that
county.
exists, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the other thing to note is the county also does not have a maximum square footage ordinance on structures below 11,000 feet or somewhere around tree line. So just to take the opportunity to advocate for considering how to regulate maximum square footage in the town of Silverton, noting that the county has no regulations. That's the
They
planning
have,
commission.
but they do have regulations above a certain elevation.
Above tree line, whatever, it's around 11,000 feet, yes.
Uh-huh.
Then it's capped at, I think, 1,000. I don't know, Jim, can you remember? That's not great information.
No, really?
It's somewhere in there.
Mhm. Thanks.
Okay, the Historic Review Committee had a work session on the 17th.
I can talk about that one. The Historic Review Committee met with Clarion to discuss the code update as it relates to the Historic Overlay District and the Architectural Review Overlay District. And we discussed design standards and how those should apply to A-Rod with the recent change or the recent recommendation for a change. And it was a super productive conversation, and we'll be taking all that feedback into the code update.
Nice, thank you. And finally, the library board met on the 18th.
So lots of programming still happening at the library, and there's a couple of new part-time staff that are helping Misty out. The library also has a podcast called Silverton Library Connection. So if you haven't downloaded it, you should, and tune in. And then starting in February, the library will be set up to process new passports. So if you need a new passport, not a renewal, renewals are all mail-in, but if you need a new passport, you can go to the library. And they are still exploring funding for the renovations. So if you have any great ideas or funder friends that would like to contribute to a beautiful Carnegie library, please contact Misty.
And call out for the talent show on the 9th for the library sponsored. So all of you local talents, musicians, interpretive dancers, magician, I don't know, whatever your talent is, bring it.
And
It's
they're
not
doing
just for
movie night.
kids. And movie night, yeah. But it's not just for kids. Silverton Talent Show, we want to see all your talents.
Love that. Okay, moving on to trustee reports. Anybody?
Night ski was amazing. Thank you to Sarah and her team and to Nathan, to all of town staff. I've heard nothing but really great things about all the stuff happening at Kendall. So just want to give a public shout out on all the fun that's happening, the skating, the sledding, all the little kids, the big kids, the old people, everybody's over there. So come on out on a Saturday or Sunday, and night skiing was I just heard so many great things. So it was great to have stuff inside and outside. I know that's harder for staff too, but just a big shout out to everybody that participated because it was rocking.
Nice. Yeah. Okay, moving on to item 9, continued business. A, resolution 2024-02, resolution. Wait a minute. Hold on. This is about the dump truck.
Yes. So this is authorizing municipal lease purchase Citizen Bank for $35,000 for the dump truck. We were able to allocate 20,000 down, and if there are funds left over at the end of the year, we can pay this down without penalty.
Thanks for looking into that.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like kind of the comments that were brought up in our last meeting have been incorporated into the financing and procurement of the dump truck. So does anyone have any comment? Tyler, I don't want to forget about you over there. Sorry.
No, you're doing great. Thank you. I think we covered this pretty well in the last meeting, and John gave us a great overview of what this truck is worth and what went into finding it and comparing it. And I think this is an easy one.
Okay, let's tee it up then. Would someone like to make a motion to adopt resolution 2024-02? A resolution of the town of Silverton authorizing a municipal lease purchase agreement with Citizen State Bank for the lease and purchase of a 2006 International 10-wheel dump truck.
So moved.
Thank you. And Jim with the second.
All right. Trustee Edwards,
Yes.
trustee Cranker,
Yes.
trustee Parker,
Yes.
trustee Firma,
Yes.
trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Yes. Okay, item 9B, Brownfield's RFP award.
Okay, so as we've discussed, the town has been awarded an $800,000 EPA Brownfields multipurpose grant. After releasing a request for proposals, we received 8 proposals, and after trustee consideration, the town narrowed down the selection to the highest scoring firms, which included Stantec, Ramble, and Ayers. And so staff held interviews with each of these firms to learn more about their organization. And we kind of set up the interviews by discussing that this was a really large opportunity for our community, and an opportunity to catalyze positive development. And, this is a big investment. And so after going through the interviews, every firm that we got proposals from and that we interviewed was really, really awesome and would be able to do this project really well. And what kind of stuck out to us was Ramble and the fact that they're already working in San Juan County. So the cost of their travel is going to be cut farther than anyone else's. So making those dollars go further. The fact that they have people on their team who helped us kind of design our work plan and design our next steps. And that they have connections with Silverton locals who have already committed to working on this project if they were to receive it. So our funding would go indirectly to Silverton locals. Stantec and Ayers discussed their really qualified teams of planners and talked about community engagement. And they would be awesome options to But what's clear after the interviews is that I think our funding would go further with Ramble. And so because of that, we are recommending to award Ramble the RFP contract. But open for discussion and questions before we make that decision.
Okay, do we have any discussion on how to award this money?
I think given our relationship with Ramble, if that is the staff recommendation, I feel pretty comfortable moving forward with that.
Same.
Tyler, you're good? Okay,
Yeah, sounds good.
yeah, nice. I agree. Your reasoning is spot on as well. So would someone like to make a motion to award Ramble the contract to act as Silverton's qualified environmental professional in
Implementing.
implementing the Brownfields grant?
So moved.
Okay, roll call, please.
Trustee Edwards,
Yes.
trustee Cranker,
Yes.
trustee Harper.
Yes.
Trustee Grandma,
Yes.
trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucy. That looks really good. And it's a lot of money to be injected into the community. All right, moving on to 9C, wetlands application pause discussion.
All right, so in July, the trustees put a pause on land use applications unless the applicant could provide that there was no wetland on the property. This pause ends January 31st of this year, coming up next week. During the pause, we contracted with Ironwood Consulting to create a map to give the trustees a scope and scale of the wetlands in Silverton. The timing of the map was not in line with the pause since spring data will be needed to complete the assessment. Ironwood was able to map the boundaries of the wetlands, but the functional assessment of the wetlands, which ones are more valuable, cannot take place until the snow melts in June. The preliminary map was presented to the trustees last meeting, but has not been made public yet. The map was meant to be a tool to help the trustees determine if a wetland policy is needed. Staff also can use the map as a tool to ensure that a parcel with identified wetlands will go through the Army Corps for a delineation. After much research and networking with our other communities and wetland experts, staff has given the recommendation that the town should ensure that jurisdictional wetlands are protected and that landowners work with the Army Corps if they have wetlands on their property. This is based on staff capacity, fluctuating regulations, and funding. So staff also recommends lifting the moratorium. Tonight, there are two questions that we are asking for clarity on. After seeing the map, the first question is after seeing the map, do the trustees want to create a wetlands preservation program? And to what extent do they want to give staff that direction? And the second question is if you would like to continue the pause or let it expire. So those are the two questions we're seeking directions on.
Okay. Do you have a preference in what order we discuss the two questions?
They are very related to each other. But if you are not seeking a wetlands policy, then the moratorium would expire. So I think the first one on if you would like a policy or not is really the first question to ask. And then the second one would be, okay, then let's talk about the pause and go from there.
Okay, so let's start with the first question. Do we want to see wetlands protection program?
My understanding is that we're still waiting for the functional assessment,
Correct.
which won't be able to be done until after spring.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And is happening either way.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if that data would be, I think it would probably be useful for this discussion.
Mhm.
I would agree with that point too. It's hard to
Yeah,
make a decision without having all the information.
it's a little hard to say like whether we want to do any sort of protections or not when we don't have the full picture of these wetlands in town.
Has Ironwood given us an indication of the likelihood of how significant, or can you describe what Ironwood says about the likelihood of the significance of those boundaries changing from the aerial work that they did this fall to the on the ground work that they'll do in this June?
I don't think that the shape of the map is gonna change too much into the spring. If we were to have a map, it's that we would adopt, it should be updated every 5 years. So they say that those boundaries change about every 5 years. But I believe that the boundaries will not, they don't anticipate those shifting into the spring.
Yeah, it seems like what we have with the map is boundaries. We don't quite have the data to have the discussion on functionality, but we do have a map that gives us something of area to talk about, scale.
Yes.
Some of them, you could look at the map and like depression wetlands are fed by stormwater and water runoff that doesn't have a lot of particular, they're not natural wetlands per se. They're wetlands that are man-made because of the way our water flows. And so you could talk about these in a variety of ways, it seems like, even without the functional assessment information. I'm trying to find it. I saw it in some notes. I've been thinking about this for hours. But there was something that kind of talks about the functional assessment will relate to like context, like what's around it, location and size. And so I think that will definitely give us more granular level of detail, but I guess in my opinion, there's still stuff we could talk about even without the functional assessment, because it really kind of comes down to a values discussion, funding discussion, and staff capacity discussion in my mind.
I'm curious, I had a question about the memo. The staff recommendation reads that after meeting with SME environmental consultants, it seems like their advice was taken pretty, like we really took their advice when it came to giving this recommendation. I was wondering if staff talked to anybody else other than SME, and if this recommendation is based strictly off of a meeting with SME, or if we've talked to anybody else, maybe anybody in particular that has worked on a wetlands protection program in another municipality.
Yeah, and we also talked to CDOT, and their recommendation was the same. The reason why we took SME as a kind of an authority is that they're working on the state working group, which is going to be hopefully kind of protecting those gap waters between the Sackett ruling and the ruling before. So any wetlands that were lost in that time, they're working on protecting them at a state level. And they're very concerned that we would start a wetlands program in the middle of kind of this change that's happening.
Yeah, and they also noted. Oh, sorry, Tyler, did you?
No, go ahead. Please go
I
ahead.
just wanted to say they also noted during our discussion when we were kind of asking, you know, what does it look like when communities have wetland protection programs? What it looks like is them spending a lot of funding to hire a consultant firm to review most planning applications.
I mean, the community.
The community, the town, yeah. So we would contract with a firm who would, similar to community planning strategies, but different because that's not a service that they offer. And they would be reviewing, most applications, and they would be looking at what's going on that land, and, is mitigation necessary? Are buffers necessary? And it would just be a big investment into that. If we were to move.
And by big, do you have a sense of what big means? Like a number?
I don't have a number.
I mean, it probably depends on the scale of the area in question.
Yeah,
And
and it would depend on the policy, Do we want to get super specific, or is it going to be more blanket?
Yeah.
Are they going to be reviewing every single building permit?
Yeah.
Are they going to only be reviewing a few in question?
And I think that's why we're asking tonight clarity on if you want a wetlands preservation program and to what extent, because we have done a lot of research. We've spent a lot of time on this. And we want to make sure that if we keep going, that's the direction we want to go. But if we don't want that, then we can allocate our time somewhere else, but we just need clear direction on that one. And we were hoping that, since I know we are in the middle of the wetland mapping, but if seeing the size of the impact of the wetlands in Silverton, not knowing the functional assessment yet, but seeing just kind of where they're at, would help you all kind of make that determination if you would like to protect them and what that would look like. And to what extent, really. And then we would come back with policy options if that was the desire of the board. But would like that kind of yes, we want a policy, or no, we don't want a policy.
I mean, I know that the board wants to protect wetlands in the spirit of protecting wetlands. I think I'm wondering if the question can really be phrased as, is this the manner in which we want to go about protecting wetlands through municipal engagement with research and policy that informs how those are regulated? Because I do want to include in our conversation that there are other ways of managing and preserving and protecting wetlands that also cost a lot. I mean, I think either way, managing and preserving wetlands costs a lot of money. We just have to look at where's the money coming from, is I think the bottom line question. Is the municipality footing the bill for that? Or is it, private nature or, nature conservancies, but purchase property and land and preserve it? Is it, land trusts, that kind of thing? I just want to put on the table that what we're considering is the municipality's role in that.
Well, I think that's an important point to raise too, Sally, because it makes me think of our previous discussion about the brownfields. Is there also are a variety of ways in which the town of Silverton is protecting and preserving natural resources and prioritizing that, right? We already approved the CDOT project with the Merrills. Now, maybe that isn't in jurisdictional wetlands anymore, but we still have put funding and time into that project because we think that that's important, and that area and that partnership is important. When we're talking about the brownfields projects, the Zanoni parcels for housing, but we're talking about Lackawanna and areas up there, and that whole discussion can open up conversations around important environmentally sensitive areas that have a function in the community. And so I think it's a little not clear-cut to say, well, if the town doesn't set up a wetlands protection program as part of our building code, then the town is not protecting wetlands in any form, because there is a variety of ways in which we could do it. By having something like a map that obviously the public hasn't seen yet, so it's hard to have a concrete conversation about it. But in having something that is a map that has discrete boundaries, we could have conversations around, well, the town could protect land that it owns, right? There's a variety of areas in here that could say, well, this is town-owned land and we're going to focus there, and maybe have a different policy when it comes to development on private land. There can be a whole lot of nuance related to this. I think for me, the reason why I say it kind of comes down to a values conversation is because there are always trade-offs, and these are definitely finite resources. And we have finite resources in a variety of things that we're trying to do. And I think that the map that we have from Ironwood to me is a really great start because it has this delineation. I feel like it's pretty scientifically sound and rigorous. It has pretty clear-cut guidelines on how we've set up boundaries. And so that feels really good to me, of where we've gotten. I think what you said, Gloria, is helpful, is that we could potentially use this map to just be a tool for staff, right? To even give some direction. When we first started this conversation, we had not a lot to really go off of that was Silverton specific. And so this is much more nuanced and a better tool for town to think about land that has water related issues, and then also land that is currently regulated or not. I would like to talk about how we could make the map public, in which form, because I think even if we don't have any wetlands protection program or regulations associated with it, it still is like the public paid for it. So I would love for them to have access to it in some form, because I think it's a useful tool just to even see how wetlands have changed over time with the pre and post Sackett ruling, what the implications have been to acreage that have been protected or unprotected by the Army Corps during that time. Just full disclosure, and this is probably not shocking to many people because I've said this before, I am uncomfortable with extending the moratorium in its current form. I think it's too broad. I think it has, in just the last 6 months, limited development that really probably should have happened and would have built units that would have housed people. And that's always been my top priority when thinking about this. And so just full disclosure. So I'm uncomfortable extending the moratorium in its current form. So I'm just putting that out there. I'd have to be convinced in a certain way that a pause in a different format or in a much more narrower scope would be a good way to move forward. And I think it was really interesting to see staff's recommendations, because what I hear you guys saying is, this is important. We have prioritized it over 18 months. It feels a little bit to me like, if we just don't extend the moratorium and then we kind of don't do anything, we've sort of wasted this time or wasted the funding for this tool that we now have. And so I think it feels helpful to continue to have a conversation around land use. But at the same time, what I hear our staff saying is you have to make trade-offs and set priorities. And as much as I don't like that because it feels a little constraining, when I think about all the variety of things that we're working on, that is kind of the environment that we're in. You know, today I spent my whole day thinking and working on wetlands, and I wasn't writing a grant that could potentially increase access to healthcare in Silverton, right? There's trade-offs that we're making when we're spending the time on this instead of something else. And we're always having to make trade-offs in time and opportunity cost and what we're actually funding. So that's kind of where I'm sitting. I also feel like the cost of protecting a small area, if we were to determine there's a certain area that's really high value to set up a wetlands protection program, I think that cost shouldn't fall on, 4 and property owners, but that really the community should find a way to pay for it if that's really what we want to pay for.
Tyler?
No, sorry about that. My dog got spooked and started barking. I didn't know if it just came all through. My sorry. He just freaked out and started barking at the door. So.
Well, that was my long spiel, but I think if we can find a way to move forward, one thought I had as potential compromise that I'd be curious on staff's feedback on, and maybe CPS's feedback is, and we can kick around this idea. So I'm uncomfortable extending the moratorium because I think it's too broad. I value having options for building to happen in some of these areas. I think that's important for the community. I also recognize that it doesn't sit right with me to say we're doing nothing. We're just letting the moratorium expire. We now have this really pretty map and we're not doing anything with it. Because I recognize that there are other community priorities around what we've spent the last 18 months talking about. could we do something like adopt the map in a public format? Maybe even have a conversation about some of the types of wetlands. Like, I'm just gonna put it out there, again, the public hasn't seen it, but if we took some of the wetlands that are more man-made, said, you know what, we're lifting the moratorium on those ones, those can be built on, we're not gonna prioritize those, even though we don't have the functional assessment. And we have the jurisdictional stuff, currently that's already covered by the Army Corps. What would we think, and I hate to suggest this because I hate this as a land use policy, but it is a compromise. What would we think about the non-jurisdictional areas being use subject to review applications? So there's still an opportunity for those building applications to come before the board. It's not a blanket moratorium on them and a ban, and it's not a blanket like you can build everywhere. I hate use subject to review as a land use policy. But in the interim, before we're in our code rewrite, is that something that gets us closer to moving forward in some way? It's not what staff.
Sorry, it doesn't.
It sounds like that's where we came from.
It still puts you in the position of.
Yeah.
We have nothing to put this, we have nothing in our code that says that we can't build on this wetland. So even though you've bumped this application to a use subject to review application, you still have to evaluate it per our code.
Yeah.
And unless we have a policy surrounding wetlands, we can't.
It sounds like it kind of puts us to a situation that got us in
Yeah.
situation.
We have no tool to then deny that application.
Correct.
If we wanted to.
Correct. So we'd still have to evaluate that application by our code. And if we still don't have anything in our code to do that, we wouldn't be able to.
There's no justification for use subject to review.
Yeah, additionally, if we were to adopt the map wouldn't be able to be adopted until like April at the earliest with noticing requirements and hearing requirements. And then additionally, people would have to wait until the snow melts to get a delineation or determination.
And that delineation or determination would be coming from not the map, but instead from a consultant. Like that would be an added on layer of application review.
Right.
Yeah.
Which we're currently having everyone go through right now.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So right now with all of the applicants that we have, we can't move through the planning review process until the snow melts, or until this moratorium expires.
Yeah. We could use the map to reduce the scope of the moratorium, but the only purpose for that is if at the end of that, the board is going to actually have a policy and the community is willing to pay for that.
Yes. Other thoughts?
We got boundary issues.
Here it comes
Can you
again.
believe it?
Here it comes again.
I don't know how we can get a true understanding without the true scope of knowledge that we just don't have in front of us yet. That's where I'm at in trying to wrap my head around this. We need those mechanisms in place. We need those tools in place. It was one of the key points that we discussed early on is having those tools to be able to tell these landowners and explain to them and protect them, which is why we acquired this third party, was to not only protect those property owners, but to protect the wetlands themselves and to protect the town and to really gather that information so that we could formulate and create a true definition. And we just don't have all that information yet. And I don't know how we lift the pause without the full information in front of us. Because then that just you're just opening the same can of beans and worms all over again. And it puts us back to square one. And then you got a lot of angry people. So I just don't see, and convince me, tell me otherwise, show me otherwise, how we get to that position where we're not only protecting the town, we're protecting the property owner, we're protecting the wetlands and what we have around us that we're so fortunate to have, and also be able to create that true definition that allows us to take this down the road and eliminate a lot of these issues that we're seeing right now. And I am not one for kicking the can down the road, but even if we adopt the map, that won't be adopted until the next session, until the next board. But if we continued the pause, call it what you will, or lifted it, either way, we're still gonna face it. The new board will face it, we're gonna face it. But instead of doing it in a clean break or a clean start, this new board, which to me looks like the best possible option. I don't feel comfortable voting on this and approving this, and yeah, let's lift this, let's all go full bore without having the information in front of us. That's why we paid this money to do it. I just don't see it.
I just don't know that I don't want to convince you otherwise. I don't know that. From my understanding of what Ironwood has done so far, which I think is really valuable and really important contribution to the community, because it has provided us more information than we were going on before. So we can look at an image, we can see boundaries. I think, the further we zoom in, like, can we see 25 feet one way or another way? That is still up for debate. Do we know the functionality? We don't. But when I look at what we have so far, my understanding from Ironwood is that what could change in the boundary isn't so much wetland or no wetland, it would be functionality, 5-star, 1-star. And I think we will return to the same question. How would we like to handle non-jurisdictional wetlands in Silverton? Like, that question is our question today. That question is our question in June. That's not going to change. So, and just to note, what we learned too is that the non-jurisdictional wetlands, the jurisdictional wetlands, the wetlands in Silverton that are protected currently by the Army Corps of Engineers, and so developers must adhere to the Army Corps' standards and requirements, have stayed the same, except for the swath over by the campground road.
And that's about 8 acres.
And that's about 8 acres. And so with additional information, we're not going to find, my understanding is we don't necessarily locate new wetlands. We just learn more about what we see here in this map. So the amount of jurisdictional wetlands in the United States, according to Sackett, is at risk. That's problematic. Like, that's not healthy for our earth. Relative to the town of Silverton, the jurisdictional wetlands that are changing is a relatively small amount of land. And it gets us back to the same question, I think, which is, what do we want to do with those non-jurisdictional wetlands? Because I don't think we're having a conversation about a significant amount of wetland area that's losing protection. Like, if I slid this arrow across the map and we had blue and then, it kind of like all went to orange, that would be significant and alarming, and it would probably change my thinking about the amount of resources that the town should invest in what it will take, which, kind of returning to the memo, what it takes to go through the complexity of municipally managed wetlands protection programs, especially given the timing that Lucy's and Gloria have already kind of shared with us. So I think, just to be realistic about what we're talking about, like, I think I was really worried that we would slide the arrow of, these were all jurisdictional, we'd slide the arrow across and suddenly be like, whoa, we're really we've lost a lot of protections. And I mean, I think 8 acres is nothing to sneeze at, certainly, but in the scope of, climate change and just balancing like really, really big systemic issues where it's like, let's think about who we're going to vote for in our national elections and what judges are making these decisions. Like, that's a systemic issue. And when we look at our little town of Silverton, I think we have to be pragmatic and attend to the efforts that the staff. I think if the staff had like a great idea and a great solution for this, they've been working on this for, 18 months now? And everyone's heads have been put in this game, and we've called on experts and we've leaned on each other. I think if there was an easy or a even feasible solution at this time, we would have it in this memo.
Well, I think, Sally, you raised a really important question, and I guess it's a question I have for my colleagues, is that at the end of this, even if Ironwood was done with their product and information, how much are we willing to pay for what we're seeing? That's really kind of what it comes down to me. Pay both as like a community and an opportunity cost, because staff time, and maybe there's outside funding available, which is great. I think there probably is, or conservation funding or grants or EPA funding, but that still means that we just had our budget cycle. We negotiated a lot of challenging issues, and it means we're putting staff time and potential grant match or whatever towards non-jurisdictional wetlands. That's really what we're coming down to. So I guess my question for my colleagues, and maybe it's a question for the future board, is how much time, community effort, and money are we willing to put into protecting non-jurisdictional wetlands? Because
And the deprioritization
of the other.
Because
I really think that is the crux of the question. And to Sally's point, I don't think answering that question changes all that much once we have the functional assessment.
Maybe it does.
It's my understanding that the functional assessment would provide us with some additional information pertaining to like nutrient cycling, water filtration, flood control, and stabilization of the soil. And I do think that's relevant, particularly for talking about whether or not people can build on these. So for me, it's not about if the size is going to change, it's what does that area look like and how does it function? Like, I do think that's relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and as it pertains to jurisdictional and non-jurisdictional, I see Sally's point. We obviously, the Sackett ruling didn't change us very much, but one of the reasons I was such a proponent of looking at non-jurisdictional wetlands is this isn't the first time that those maps have changed. These change every 5 years. And that's why I wanted to put some local guardrails, or hoped to see if they were worth putting local guardrails in place, because Sackett isn't the first one. They have shrunk before, they've been expanded before, and instead of being, just having to go with whatever the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers decides, or based on what administration is in power every couple of years. That's one of the reasons I was such a proponent of having our own municipal standards. That way, it doesn't matter if they're okay, so they're completely shrunk, we still have guardrails in place, or they're expanded to include things that we never thought we would want to expand on. Well, that's fine too. Then, but we're not at the whim of fluctuations based on which administration was in power, and that's one of the reasons I was so interested in seeing if we could put some municipal guardrails in place for this issue. Sackett's only the most recent in a long history of these boundaries being changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Tyler.
With the state level CDPHE group, when the state level determines their guidelines, their parameters, their boundaries, will that supersede anything that we do here? Is it premature for us to even approach this without knowing what the state's going to be doing?
Yeah, that's
Because we can talk till the sun goes down, but
Yeah.
the state is going to come down and change it all.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we can always have more stringent regulations than the state.
Right.
But once the state adopts policy, developers would have to follow that.
Right.
But that would be
And
that
they're-
would be the minimum that would be the minimum policy.
That would be, yes,
Yeah.
that would be the minimum. And so they're working right now with CDOT to explore these gap waters to see how the amount and the quality of these gap waters and if it's worth it for the state to create their own
Mhm.
policy similarly to
What we're doing.
what we're doing
now.
here. It sounded like a really familiar process.
And I believe the state is gonna create that. I just shouldn't say believe, they are gonna create that. So as much time and effort we want to put into this right now, knowing that the state is gonna come down with its own rules and regulations and guidelines, this could be all just academic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's an
Yes.
expensive academic
So
exercise.
it comes back full circle.
I do,
The very first question that we have here, which is our moratorium pause. Do we extend it past January 31? Or do we just release it and open it up? Because we're gonna put a lot of people, I mean, it's gonna be, those property owners are gonna be put at risk. They will. So we're trying to not only protect them, and I'm gonna come full circle, we're not only protecting them, but we're protecting us and our town resources.
Unless those property owners, is there liability involved with property owners accusing the town of making their property undevelopable?
that would be a Clayton question.
And can we yell at the state for that?
Well, and I do want to point out that we started this, 18 months ago. And in that time, the Sackett rule came out. So there was a change. And then from the time of August to December, this CDPHE group was starting up. So that's another reason why we were like, wow, a lot of things are changing right now. And we're not sure if we can keep up with it at this point. But I don't know if it will stop changing because now we have a national election, which could change the rule again. So just keeping that in mind, that this is a very malleable, I don't know another word right now.
It's fluid.
It's fluid. It's very fluid right now. And there's not a point at which they'll say, okay, we've figured it all out.
Stable. It's not
Right.
stable as far as decision making. So a question I have before Clayton answers the first question is, if the state were to come out with if, let's say we lifted our moratorium and the state came out with a policy, likely that kind of has a state designation for things that lost their jurisdictional designation in the post-Sackett world. If someone already had an application in progress, would that affect them? How does that play out legally for an applicant and also for the town implementing policy if the state comes up with a separate regulation approach?
And I would defer that to Clayton.
Yeah, I'm not sure I follow the question. But it sounds to me like you're asking if somehow there are circumstances where previous designations are grandfathered based on the timing of their application. Is that a fair
Well,
synopsis?
basically, if the state comes up with a new regulation that now a variety of land in town has different requirements than what the town or the Army Corps under the post-Sackett ruling has, how does that affect applications in process?
I mean, I guess it depends on when the application closes and when those rules would go into place. I don't see the state coming in and trying to regulate local wetland laws as long as they're not less stringent than the Sackett ruling. So that's the first issue is, we're talking about these state issues, but I don't, there's no indication that that's going to have any at least immediate effect on, what you guys are trying to do with the wetlands. the whole thing and like your discussion, I mean, just to be honest, it's kind of, I want to be able to answer you specifically, but you're asking like very kind of circumstantial, individual factually based questions that we don't know. In general terms, I don't think much has changed since my last review of SACIT for you. It's incumbent upon local government, if you want to make a more stringent definition of wetland and apply it. And they're basically going to let you do that insofar that you don't step on interstate waterways.
Thanks.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I can't be more specific with your question, Trustee Cranker, because I don't know, and I don't think anybody knows.
Yeah, it's hypothetical. We don't know what the state's gonna do.
No idea.
But that
But
said,
I doubt they're gonna resource, and I doubt they're gonna try to. I just don't see the state resourcing to a point where they're getting involved in local designation.
Mhm.
It's never been there. It's always been the core. I mean, you're talking like crazy amount of time, money, effort, people, organization. I think they might have state regulations for them, for, state-owned property, but as far as, local municipalities, I think it's still going to be incumbent upon that municipality if they want to diverge from the SACIT ruling.
Yeah.
That's the environment as I see it right now anyway.
And so, I mean, for us, again, what that would mean is like, do we value these enough to protect them? If we do put something in place, the only thing that would change is if the state puts something in place, it's still, unless it was more stringent than anything we put in place, then it wouldn't supersede ours anyway. So I guess it depends, like, I guess what it really means then is, do we want to put something in place like, and for future decisions. So if we put our own protections in place, and then there's something that comes after SACIT from the Army Corps that maybe diminishes the jurisdictional wetlands even more, then they would be protected by our municipal ruling. So, or rule. So I guess it comes down to a question of how important are they? Is it important enough for us to put other things on hold and make those trade-offs, or should we just get rid of the moratorium and rely on the Army Corps of Engineers to protect the little bit of designation that we have left? And I strongly believe that if we rely on the Army Corps into the future, we're going to see a point where we're not going to have any jurisdictional wetlands left, because they have been shrinking for the past 50 years. When you start looking at these maps, they've been getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Again, SACIT is only the most recent change.
I just think I still put it to the board and the community is, what are we willing to deprioritize? That's basically what our staff has asked us is, if we want to do this, answer the first question of having a wetlands protection program. Where's the funding? And what are we going to change or reduce or deprioritize? I mean, I'm looking at staff report and the number of meetings and things that are issues, and the upcoming issues list just keeps growing longer. I don't see the upcoming issues list getting shorter. So to my colleagues and to the community, what do you want us to do differently?
I mean, the memo, tonight we've taken the recommendations of the staff, I think, except for on this issue, from everything from dump trucks to the deck at Kendall, like it spans the scope. This is the one issue where I think we've diverged at times. And I think staff has kind of hopped on board to try and help us solve these problems. And then this is what the memo says tonight. This will require a tremendous amount of time from the community development director, CPS, town administrator, and town attorney. With a variety of projects that have been previously prioritized, staff has limited capacity to devote more time to wetland policy research. If trustees request more time be spent on wetland research, they should review the staff's current project and capacity and reprioritize projects and timelines to accommodate what's being requested. So I think, like, as part of this discussion, if the direction is to go towards, really prioritizing wetlands, I think that we could potentially refer back to a previous memo that just lists prioritized projects, and we'd have to maybe sort of audit that and say, yeah, that needs to come off, that needs to come off. I think we would need to sort of specify what priorities are coming off the list.
I think what we're really looking for is clear direction. Like, does everyone on this board want a wetlands policy? Outside of jurisdictional, that's like number one, because we've been going back and forth, and as staff, if we're just researching, like, at some point, we need to know we're doing that for a cause, for something, and we still don't feel like we've gotten that clear direction. Do we want a wetlands policy that goes outside of jurisdiction? And once we get that clear direction, that's like, then we can jump, we can go. But we don't have that direction, and that's what we're asking for tonight.
Well, I think it has to be paired with the clear direction on what's coming off the plate. I would not feel comfortable giving direction to pursue the wetlands protection policy without giving clear direction around what gets deprioritized and naming what adjustments to our budget we want to make to be able to cover the expense of it. Yep.
Is it fair to say that most of this board would like to see jurisdictional protections? However, given the greater context between Sackett, the state, and the fluctuating administration, that this might not be the right time to prioritize that?
That's a fair statement for me.
Like, I don't think it has to be like, oh, we don't care at all, so let it lapse and we'll just be done with this issue and everything was a waste of time. Sometimes it's not the right time to deal with something. And it sounds like this is not the right time.
I still think that, again, that functional assessment, it would actually help us quite a bit.
I agree.
I'm not an expert with what wetlands are, how important they are, what their worth could be. And again, after speaking to hydrologists and environmentalists, et cetera, it does sound like once we lose them in our alpine environment, it is difficult to get them back. So I'm back to where we started, which was to get a functional assessment to see if it's, and I think it would also give the community members a much better idea of, look, if this is this is the most rare wetlands above 9,000 feet in the United States, I imagine our community would say, we should probably save that. If they say, these happen by accident and they're really easy to, rebuild, even though I haven't heard that, then I think our community would probably say, oh, okay, well, let's allow building. But again, without that functional assessment, I think it's hard to say. I would also say that because there are a lot of changes, I think if we do want to have a wetlands protection policy for non-jurisdictional wetlands, now is the time to pursue it. Or once we get the functional assessment out, I would say as soon as possible, because then at least our rules, if they were more stringent, would supersede any cutting of state or federal rules.
Yeah, and Tyler, I do agree, because I also feel that without the functional assessment, I mean, I am not a scientist, but I do have a scientific background. And without that information, I'm really uncomfortable making any kind of decision about this.
Jordan, I think we need you to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah, happy to hop in. I think I, approached it from a slightly different perspective of like, what would be my decision if it doesn't matter about the funding or the money or just, and I think for me, it's like, of course, yeah, we should protect these areas that are really fragile and take care of them and then figure out the problem of, okay, how do we do that and how do we fund that and then go from there. But again, I think it's been kind of broad views. I think my concern is if we're not all 100% on board with this decision at this moment, it's going to last beyond my time on the board. and a lot of our other time on people's time here. And the direction could change, and then we've wasted staff's time again in a different way. And I also don't want to kick the can down the road, but it also feels reminiscent of the situation we had when we first took office, also dealing with the wetlands situation that we had to go back to square one and spend months and months and months figuring out a new plan to deal with. But I'm definitely of the perspective of we should protect these areas.
Okay, so.
So applying all this information to question one, what is everyone thinking?
I was gonna ask.
Okay, ask it.
Good.
It sounds to me, and I'm not trying to speak for anyone, that it's like leaning towards yes on protections, but there's a lot of nebulous questions about context, timing, and funding and staff capacity in the functional assessment, which is making it really difficult to do anything right now.
So does that mean allow the moratorium to lapse?
That's the question.
Or does that mean?
Yeah, or do you
extending
have
the
a
moratorium just as it is today?
Dana had mentioned earlier the possibility of a continued pause with a more narrow focus.
But I think
I don't know
we have a map, we can't do that, right? Like you have to have the map as an official adopted thing, entity that exists.
Adopt the map without an official policy is my follow-up question then. Like as something that we are able to use and reference.
You can adopt it as like an overlay.
Okay.
But we'd have to have some type of, some
Parameters around
something
it.
around it, or otherwise it's just a map that means nothing.
Well, it's a map that looks
Unless
nice
we can
and
map to make a moratorium.
Yeah,
So my question was, and I think I made it confusing by not asking about the map first. And we possibly pursue Dana's idea of a pause with a more narrow focus if we first adopt the map as a reference. Or an
If it relates to the map, yeah. I mean, like what would that narrow focus be? And that's the other thing that I wanted to point out if, and that's kind of why I wanted to answer, do we want a wetlands policy first? Because if we do extend a moratorium, we are going to have deliverables in there. And at this point, like that would be one of the deliverables is a policy. When we were presented the options from the consultants, initially it included a wetlands program and that was expensive. And so we
$40,000 above what we paid.
exactly. And so
develop it, not to implement it.
right, and so the compromise was to develop the map so that to give you an idea of what was out there if you wanted to create a protection program. So keeping that in mind, and that would be a deliverable from an extended moratorium.
Well, I think this is why I keep going back to the question of, I absolutely think the functional assessment is useful. I am 100% on board and paying for it. I think it's important context. And I still feel like on a personal level, we could answer the question of, even with the functional assessment or not, you look at the map. And again, I'm sorry for the public that we just keep referring to a map that doesn't exist in the public sphere, but
But
And it
the
will.
map's not complete.
It will, but it's not complete. And
Not complete.
you guys have like a preview of it, but.
exactly, but we still have something that's better than a random sketch that's been sent to us or whatever we have in our brains. We have something that is like 95% look-atable, referenceable for our reference. And so what I still come down to is we say we have jurisdictional wetlands and we have non-jurisdictional wetlands. How much are we willing to pay to prioritize, even without the functional assessment, those non-jurisdictional wetlands? And I have to say, I recognize their value as an entity of their own for stormwater management, for ecological purposes. And I also see a cost associated with totally prohibiting building on them. if you put a house, because you have kind of have both sides of the ledger. I was thinking about this in my mind, like here are the costs to doing away with this land area. And here are the costs to not doing away with this land area. And like, for example, if there's a house there that houses a year-round resident that supports a restaurant staying open one more day, or has a kid in the school that is, you know, however many thousands of dollars a year that the school gets for that kid, like we have to kind of add up these things equally when we're thinking about them. I don't like the scarcity mindset, but I also am trying to say, even if we had the functional assessment, have we still answered the question of, are we willing to pay for that land? And are we willing to pay for staff time and capacity to implement a policy for that land? I can't answer that question yet, because I also think we're talking about 1 square mile in the town when there's hundreds of square miles in the county that we could be focusing on as a community, right? Or we could be focusing on the land that's actually within our control as a town when it comes to the RMPP, when it comes to town-owned property, when it comes to
burning coal, when it comes to the size of our homes, when it comes to the building
microgrids,
materials that we
putting
use,
solar
when it
panels
comes to
up.
solar panels. Like, I think there are lots of threats to the environment and there are lots of potential solutions. This one has been in front of us for so long. It has consumed so much time. When I look at the list of considerations for the trustees, when I think about what we want to commit to in the next coming months in terms of time, money, and outcome, I just don't think that municipally controlled non-jurisdictional wetlands in this way is the most effective approach right now for the town of Silverton. And I think that I wish that there was like a nice large donor who could buy tons of land and put it into a conservancy or a less messy way, but I don't know. I think this is a really huge commitment. I also, we've been here so many times and around. I think we know our stances. I think it's time that we give some direction and set the course for the staff. And I wonder if we'd be willing to go forth on the first question, which is around the item of a wetland policy. So is this is just direction, or would you like a motion?
Sally, I've been trying to ask a question
Oh, sorry.
for about 2 minutes now, so I'm just going to
Please go.
Gloria. If we sunset the moratorium, can the next iteration of the board revisit this topic after the functional assessment is available?
Yes.
I'm fine with sunsetting it.
Wait, with sunsetting, do you want to start with the?
I'm fine with allowing the moratorium to sunset on January 31st.
And do you want to weigh in on the wetland policy direction?
I'm looking at the packet and I'm seeing option 1. And that is what I'm proposing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so on the subject of the moratorium, which we haven't spent too much time discussing, do we want to do a little moratorium
Well, yeah, and so if
discussion?
the policy is kind of mute if you do let the.
Yeah, the option 1 is allow the moratorium
And then
January 31st. No action is needed. The implications is that this falls back to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And then this becomes a topic for the next board.
yeah,
Given that 4 of us have said that we're not comfortable of doing this without the functional assessment, it doesn't sound like we're going to land on a wetland policy tonight. I don't know how productive this conversation is going to continue to be.
right. I am in agreement with you. So, okay, let's take that direction and see if there's additional support for item 1 that Liv just described. I support you, Liv.
Also feels like it'd be a good question for candidates night.
Definitely.
That's how the voters can vote.
Uh-huh.
Oh, man.
So if we vote tonight to allow the moratorium to end.
I think there's actually no vote.
Just, yeah.
Give direction.
Well, we suggest a direction or a motion.
Mhm.
If we allow the moratorium to end January 31st, what happens between January 31st and until this new board reconvenes or convenes and then addresses it? What transpires during that time for the property owners on the hillside or in these questionable areas? What happens to the town? What happens to the wetlands themselves?
Wetlands are regulated by the US Army Corps of Engineers and it's on the developers to get that information and present it to the US Army Corps of Engineers.
And we do have an improved process now to at least like make sure that's requested.
We put that checkbox on the.
Yeah, we review that, but also that will be on the applicants at the end of the day.
And not to throw our Army Corps brothers and sisters under the bus, but knowing that they haven't been, I would say the greatest champions of our local assets. What does that look like?
I would,
Meaning they're just gonna
They have to
whatever.
follow federal guidelines.
Yeah, they're just, they're.
And knowing that
That they
guidelines are gonna.
build on jurisdictional wetlands, it's that they have to either do a buffer or a one-to-one mitigation, depending on what the Army Corps like decides with their land. So if they are on jurisdictional, then they have to follow the regulations of the Army Corps, and the Army Corps checks them on that.
Thanks.
And if you saw the letter included in the packet tonight, that was from a landowner who has jurisdictional wetlands on their property. And they followed the process. Their plans include everything required by the US Army Corps of Engineers. So that's an example of kind of what would happen.
Well, and this to me is a really unfortunate example because I think that what this property owner is doing is following Army Corps of Engineers regulations and adhering to the requirements that the Army Corps will impose on that property. And then this is striking. We have a potential for 16 single-family residential lots. This is great news. We need some housing. And they will range in size from 2,500 square feet to 3,500 square feet. So I would be very uncomfortable in imposing wetland regulations to deter or slow down that development, because I think what I would rather do is address that scale of development from the perspective of guidelines in our code that define what we want developers to build for single family homes. A 2,500 square foot to 3,500 square foot footprint, those are very large single family homes. And that is certainly going to change the visual landscape of our community. And I think if we want to regulate the building, then we should regulate the building. If we want to regulate wetlands, we should regulate wetlands. But I don't really want to use wetlands to regulate building. I think we do need wetlands and we do need housing, and we've expressed those tensions and conflicts previously. There's no need to go into it now, but I think I kind of feel like we missed the target on that one.
So your proposal, Liv, is the moratorium sunsets and the future board takes this up to set board priorities.
yeah, but like again, I'm not a scientist, but I do have a scientific background. I'm a very data-oriented person. I'm an engineer. There's just not enough data here for me to feel comfortable advocating in any one way or another. And that's not going to change during the tenure of this board.
Yeah, and then people can vote for what they want.
Exactly.
Is there other support for option one? Allow the moratorium to end on January 31st. If not, would someone like to make an alternative case for a different option.
You got anything out there?
I mean, I would like, I would like to see a wetlands policy in place. And I'm going to, hopefully work with the future board to make sure we get something like that in place. And I just think that, again, and we, like Sally said, we've already all been through this, but I think they're too finite and I think they're too precious. And I think we need to do something to protect what we can protect. And I'll be working with the future board to hopefully get a policy in place to go that route. I also agree with Liv in that I really wish that, you know, we could have gotten a functional assessment. I think we would have a bunch of community support one way or the other once we have that data. I really think that we're going to see the town get behind us based on what is found, but until we have it, there's not a lot we can do. And I also agree that I think that this board has been looking at this issue for quite a while, and I'm not sure that we're going to have any great alternatives this evening.
Okay.
So in your mind, are you thinking of allowing the moratorium to expire January 31 or extending the moratorium as it is today? Because that's question one.
Yeah,
I don't know if we can answer question two without question one.
Yeah, my big concern about that, and I voiced this previously when we were first considering the moratorium, was, you know, one of the reasons we ended up here was because we did have a building plan in front of us that a lot of people in the community were upset about. And one of the reasons I supported the moratorium was because until we had all of the functional assessment and all the data, I didn't want to end up in that position again. So I would be concerned if we allowed the moratorium to sunset. But again, I don't think that we have any sort of, I don't think we have the support of this board to extend the moratorium. And I think that we might need to sadly pass this off to the next board, which I really don't want to do. But I also, I'm not sure that any minds are going to be changed here this evening. I mean, I guess that was a long way of saying I would support extending the moratorium, but without the rest of the board support to do that. I will be part of a board that lets it go and sunset, and I will push the next board to either reinstate it or work towards getting a policy in place as quickly as possible, so that after we get our functional assessment, so that we can start protecting wetlands.
Thanks, T. I'm with Tyler on this. I would agree to extend the moratorium. I know we're not taking a vote. That's my position.
Well, we do need to kind of see where we come down so we can give clear direction. What about you?
I think with the moratorium, I think it was useful for us to move forward at the time. I think we have heard from some local builders. We have heard about some of the unintended consequence, and it weighs on me heavily that we've had several projects that to me very clearly fill in line with increasing housing, and we could have had units being constructed that were not. Like, that's a very real cost in my mind to having the moratorium continue. And that just still sits with me because I hear every day about people that, like, we can't house people that need to be here. We can't. keep people in stable housing in a variety of ways. And I'm not talking about McMansions on a hillside. I'm talking about like multi-units that didn't get built. And so I really feel uncomfortable continuing the moratorium as it stands. I wish there was a way to use the map to narrow the scope. We can't. But just personally, I can't vote to extend it. And I like to live the idea of letting it sunset and then having the next board take it on. I also recognize that that's unsatisfying in the community because it opens the possibility for additional applications to come in that feel unsettling as well. So that's the uncomfortable situation we're in. I wanted to just shout out to this board and the colleagues. I know we're losing some of you soon. Just the fruitful discussion. Obviously, we don't agree and there's going to be issues we don't agree on, but I think the tone that this board has set with each other has been remarkable and significant. And I just really appreciate that discussion and level of respect and conversation. And
two things. I just want to like caution against like that use of like a false dichotomy to argue a hypothetical opportunity cost versus like a guaranteed value of having a wetland. Because there's no guarantee that the like if that gets developed, it gets developed into what you think it gets developed in.
Yes,
I'd also
totally
say
agree.
it's such a negligible amount of land that a similar amount could be created by just building a little bit higher in certain areas.
But it's not negligible to those property owners.
That's fair. I was
No.
merely talking about.
But I don't want to interrupt you either, Jordan.
That also being said, I see that we are all not on the same page as far as policy goes. And I also feel it's disingenuous to extend a moratorium without the goal of using that moratorium period to create a policy. So that's unfortunately feel like the worst best option to let it sunset and let the next board create their own fate with it, but not thrilled either way.
Yeah, and I can see how it would feel important in the final hours of our time on the board to leave with wetlands in good care, and that issue has dominated the last year and a half. And I can really respect that this is just sort of one of those issues that would feel and also be a good one to wrap up and not sort of gift to the next board. And I also want to acknowledge that I echo Dana's comments, and I really do. I know that we've been around on this so many times. Our opinions are pretty set and pretty formed on this particular issue. My opinions of wetlands and my understanding of climate change and my opinions of us as a board have not changed whatsoever. And I know this is super hard. Like, it would feel a lot better to end this meeting with a lot of unity and consensus. And I started my time on the board, and one of the questions that we were asked in our first Q&A was like, how do you plan to create unity? And thinking that just sounded incredibly overwhelming and not something that I was going to ever be able to attain. And it turns out that it has stayed true. Like, we don't have unity on this issue. And I wish we did, because I do know that everyone cares about wetlands. I think we differ in our approach to how to do it, and maybe some of our philosophical ideas about how we get there or what it takes. But regardless, the task for us is to provide this direction. And so I think it's time for us to do that, and also live with the discomfort that we are not all agreeing.
In some previous sessions, this has come up. We haven't all agreed, and I've said this before, I'll say it again. It's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay for it to not feel perfectly okay, and it's okay to disagree, and it's okay to say that we're not figuring this out tonight.
Thank you.
And it's also okay to vote differently than each other. We have most of our votes are unanimous. This board has prioritized kind of unity. Lots of it is straightforward, but even in that, I've been so impressed with this board's ability to compromise and work through hard things. Jim's an expert at proposing middle of the road. How do we get there? And I just think it's also okay for like, if Sally and I are voting in a certain way, for the four of you to outvote us. That is perfectly reasonable. And we're doing it in a way that is civil. And I can still talk to you about philosophical issues about wetlands protection tomorrow. Like, that's okay in the board.
Okay, so we've laid some groundwork, stated some ideals. Thank you for that. I think we should move forward with direction. So is there any opposition in taking the direction of allowing the moratorium to end on January 31st?
You want to show hands? No, I'm being serious.
Okay.
I'm being serious.
I'm trying to construct the best way to get to the information that these guys need.
Yeah.
So I think, and I understand that there is opposition and that we would prefer that this go another way. And if we were really all getting what we want tonight, that question doesn't really provide you the framework for answering honestly. But in terms of direction for Gloria and the staff tonight, can we support the end of the moratorium on January 31st? Let's just do a
Voice vote?
show of hands, voice vote.
No.
Okay. Jim does not.
Yes.
Jane,
I'm with you.
Dana is a yes.
This is not my preferred option, but I think we're wasting everybody's time talking about this. So could be convinced either way.
Uh-oh. Okay. Jordan?
And unfortunately, yes, with also the caveat of, I think it's just to get, once again, highlights the like broken and structural flaws in our decision-making processes.
Yeah, and this is a very unconventional way to collect information. Sorry. And Tyler?
Yeah, I don't support sunsetting the moratorium now.
I support sunsetting. So we don't have a large majority here. We do have, I think, with Liv kind of on the fence, there are 3 of us and 2 of us. So that would say that the moratorium would sunset. With sort of weak direction.
3 of us and 2 of us, 1, 2, 3. Wouldn't that mean the moratorium does not sunset?
Well, I counted Jordan as supporting the option 1. But correct me if I counted you wrong.
Did I misunderstand what you meant with what you were saying?
I was saying to let it
lapse.
Yeah.
So.
Great.
And again, I think, given where this board is, I don't support it. I also think that sometimes there are ways to move forward, and this might be the best way to move forward, sadly. And I don't support it, but I just also don't think that I'm going to talk you a majority of this board into option 3. So I'm also not banging my head against the wall that there is support for the option 1.
Okay. So now I have to think out loud about this. Thanks, everybody. On the one hand, we only have 4 more meetings, and I don't think I want to delve into a wetlands policy and pass that off to the next board. Sadly, I just don't think we have time to do it. It's the due diligence it deserves, and we still don't have that data. So I think I am then going with option one with the asterisk of I very much want to see this come back up after the functional assessment.
This is probably why staff feels so undirected.
You've had to pivot so many times around this.
And I mean, I commend you guys. This is a really hard decision that we're putting in front of you, and I know you're not taking it lightly, and I appreciate like this conversation that you've all had. And we're okay if you ever go against our staff recommendation. Like you said, we all have differences of opinion. That's okay. And we do also, just one thing that I don't think we've put out there, but we do want you all to know is that if this does sunset, we will have applications coming in that either you will likely review. Or the new board, so.
Well, I think what's been uncomfortable about this throughout the whole time is we're using kind of blunt instruments for really what feels like a finesse job. And so like when we look at option one for sunsetting the moratorium, I don't think any of us love that in its broad scope. We didn't love the moratorium in its broad scope. It was a very blunt instrument. But we don't really have another way to work with it right now. And so again, for the public, for all of us, it feels uncomfortable. It doesn't feel satisfying. Kind of because of the constraints we have when we're working in government, with boards, with staff, with municipalities, and it's not ideal. And I'm typically the optimist that likes to say we can do it all and we can structure it all and we can find ways to do it all. And this just feels very disappointing is probably the word.
Okay, so direction for staff. Are we landing on something?
Well, I think with Dana, Jordan, and myself, supporting the first option,
I just thought out loud about all of that.
and if you're comfortable maintaining that position, I think that gives the direction, and to acknowledge that Jim and Tyler have a different opinion.
Do we get some of our money back? From the, well, maybe we paid for a study that we're not gonna use.
That, I don't think that's.
No, that's still important.
So, no, it is, but if we allow this to
Something.
lapse, we're not allowing the full data to come in
Oh, no, we are.
Why would we not?
so that we can,
No, I-
talk about this and vote on it at a later date.
Well,
Because
but-
we're allowing it to open up. And we are gonna be flooded with a whole bunch of, applications.
But the study can still continue.
But
And no one,
Can it?
no one can get a delineation anyways until the snow melts, so they can't do the rest of the functional assessment until the snow melts is the way I
I have
have.
a feeling that gonna go in a different direction. That's just my personal opinion.
Then you will have landed on the right side of your.
But yes, you will receive applications.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I have a discomfort in some of the applications that are coming in. I just really agree with Liv on this one. I think the timing is really tough. I think it's unbudgeted expense. I think the new board is going to be better positioned to take this on.
And there will be an effect. Just like there's an effect for the moratorium there, there can't not be. We're not thinking that there isn't.
And to clarify my point, Jim, I'm not saying I don't want to circle back to this. Should I be elected to the next board? I am just saying.
Well, I'm not calling you out.
No, I'm just saying that we don't
I'm
have the
talking about the
data.
process.
We don't have the data to make a decision, and that we're certainly not going to reach one tonight with this particular board. It sounds like even without me throwing my weight in either direction, there's support for option one, so.
Yeah, well, and I think we've gotten there. So let's give direction. Wagons west. Let's do it.
Okay, so we'll have we have
Whatever that means.
closure on, for now, for tonight, we have closure on item 9C, the wetlands application pause discussion. however unsatisfying it may be.
Very.
9D, Kendall Deck RFP award.
Thank you, Sarah. Sarah, I'm so sorry I put this one
How
out.
did you get on D? You should have been
I know, I did.
C.
That's on me.
That's Hazel.
I've actually been here the whole time and like, oh gosh, I'm so sorry.
Gold star for
Chair. That's the
participation.
short chair.
Yeah.
I heard.
So, we received one bid on the Kendall deck and it's significantly over budget. There's one issue that was discovered when we were soliciting bids and it's the foundation pillars that need to be reset. The bid also includes a heated patio, which Sarah and I do not feel is important enough to justify the increase in costs. And we are asking if we can extend the timeline for the RFP in hopes to get a bid within the budget and cut out the added expenses to heat the deck while addressing the foundation issues as well. And Sarah is here for any questions that you might have. So.
Melissa, are there any wetlands involved? Too soon? Is that too soon? That was, I just want everyone to know that was more for me, you guys. Cause this is,
As I would
Okay.
guess there are.
Way to break the ice there, Jim.
I know you guys
I
are
love it.
welcome. 4 years of this, you're welcome.
And I also wanted Sarah to see how beautifully you all work together. So
You know what?
great demonstration.
Welcome.
I appreciate that. I also want to say that I really, really deeply appreciate all the support that Kendall Mountain has gotten individually and just as a community as a whole. You guys back there as well. I think I realize the value of Kendall now more than ever in being involved and the feedback that I've gotten from people. And then now to be directly involved in, bringing the next step to the vision, whether it's master plan or just this project that I've
Or an actual
inherited.
step.
Yeah, it's an actual step. So I'm really excited about this and I'm very motivated to get it over the finish line. So I guess this is step one. What questions do you have? Prepared to answer them all.
It's been like it's been like a whack-a-mole project. And so-
Yeah.
Do you have any questions on the structural component of this and what it's gonna take to even start the project? Or how I can explain where the cost is coming from, what it's gonna entail?
Let's start there.
Start there? Okay, so we need to shore up the back part of the building.
Okay.
Which is essentially lifting 100,000 pounds of roofing, 1.5 inches, so we can remove the concrete foundations that have shifted because they weren't backfilled. So we start there. We're gonna build a bigger slab underneath and a bigger pier to support the wooden elements that are supporting the roof. So that's step one. Not optional. Fortunate, but we can also do this in phases too, right? Not ideal. They're confident they can start in March. Our first wedding is the second week of June. Confident that they can meet the timeline. So that was the second step in questioning that I had for them, but that's where we're starting initially is.
I'm sorry. So the existing slab didn't have turn downs or pillars, and so it's not supporting the weight of the roof, or I'm sorry, would you just explain that one more time?
Totally. So the beams, the wooden beams, the 5 piers that are coming off thing of the backside of Kendall are off-centered on the piers.
Okay.
So
Oh, boy.
I have pictures if
Yeah.
you'd like to see too. They're
Nope. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Copy that. So we got to lift it and, okay. Good times.
pull them out, reset everything underneath.
So that's the $30,000 non-negotiable structural piece.
Correct.
In this bid.
Mhm.
I did see the total and just feel super uncomfortable
Mhm.
from the various discussions. It's too bad we couldn't get this done years ago when prices were a lot lower, but that's where we are with all of life. So again, just even removing the heating, that looks like it's only like the 50,000 in there. And so I don't know, do we really get to somewhere where this fits within our budgeted amount.
Sarah and I have some ideas on how we could possibly make it a little less burly, and a little bit more practical.
A lot more manual. There's also the option to stub the heating elements too, so we could.
Mhm,
Do it.
Put them in
reduce it,
later.
Set it up.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, how much savings is that? You still have to run all the heating through the pad and then you save on not buying a boiler, I guess, out of the gate,
Right.
or, okay.
That would be the third boiler that's going into support.
Is Kendall set up to make any money this year?
Off the wedding revenues, yes.
Okay, that was my other question is.
It's 114,000.
I mean, I don't see weddings as like bringing in 114 grand, but if there's a way to look at that fee structure and
We
just
just need to charge more.
knowing that it's kind of like this water sewer, you know, like we have to kind of invest.
And that's actually charging more is not really a joke. We are looking into that for our next fee schedule.
No, I am not. I really am serious.
Yeah.
And I also, I guess my question is like, is there a way to just consider income sources specifically for the capital improvement? Even if it's in terms of like, I'm gonna throw out some ideas, even though this isn't my job. I think you'll do a better job of this, but you know, like a $2 optional upcharge on a lift ticket, or the wedding fees, or just, you know, looking at like where we generate income at Kendall and specifically allocating that towards the deck improvements. I mean, like the pillars have to be shored up. That's just a structural safety issue. That's got to happen. And the deck in a way is also somewhat of a safety issue, the way it's working right now. And so I think the redesign also accounted for some of those roof pitches that slide, which is an additional safety issue. So
Agreed.
what you need from us right now is, wait, sorry. What are the additional questions on the Kindle deck? I don't mean to rush us along on this.
I think we need some sort of a deck, and I trust staff to keep working on a cost-effective solution. And like some of Sally's ideas. I mean, you guys are creative, thoughtful. Other source of revenue, ways to do it. We do need something there. I think we owe it to the community. I don't love $260,000 worth of something.
It's a big deck.
I think Shane in one of our meetings said like he's learned that decks are just always so expensive. He had a deck.
That was a comment, yeah, yeah.
Well, honestly, this is more of a patio. Like we're.
You know that.
Okay, like, it's not really a traditional deck, it's more of a patio.
Really, it's actually just pillars. In a gravel pit or something.
It's cheaper.
I support extending the timeline.
That's called a
Oh, geez, Jim.
I mean, you're on a
You were
roll.
just really
You're on a roll.
Come on, it's that time of night.
getting.
You're on a roll. You could-
loopy.
Yep, we should start talking about the cemetery.
Okay, I'm setting the budget question aside, extending the timeline for soliciting additional bids. Any opposition to that? Exploring alternative options to the original deck plan. I'm open to that. And the original deck plan has, you know, we don't want to throw good money at bad, but there is a significant sort of investment that we've made in the original deck plan. So it's been engineered twice, I think. I don't love the idea of engineering it a third time.
As part of our reconsiderations, could we consider the phase idea? Breaking it into phases.
Absolutely.
And let's dump this one on the next board.
Hopefully we can get you a bid before then is our goal. Is gonna approve one.
I mean, then the Kendall, like, this Kendall deck, it predates me. You guys have it? I mean, it's a.
Yes, we have.
Start.
Yeah, it's been here for a while.
We've
It's
had
been-
it.
Like
the
dumping
previous
things onto
board
the
had.
next board, or do some things just take
On the
time?
same timeline as the land conveyance over there.
Oh, man.
Right.
Touche, Jordan.
Oh, yeah. Well, so that's my thought on the alternative options in terms of proceeding beyond the initial budget. Like proceeding to, proceeding $175,000 beyond the budget is I think that's too much.
Well, current is 114 over, budget was 175, yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the number in red. I got it. It's 114,000 over. That's still an amount that's, I think, too much
I
over.
mean, there's a point where we have to accept that costs go up, et cetera, et cetera. We talked about this with Blair Street. We've talked about this whole variety of things. We talked about this with the NEC Park. So I guess I'm feeling like we have to be realistic. Like if it's a priority to have a deck, which I think it is, it's a priority to have some sort of structure off the back of that building. At what point do we have to be realistic about how much it costs? Oh,
So we can take out the heat and reduce it with the 114 by 50.
And we elect to keep the stairs that go to the rental shop as well, so that removes the cost of the demo.
Okay, wait, so. Yeah.
Do you have a proposed breakdown to get to a target dollar amount?
No, this is just an estimate. Sorry, I tried.
Oh, yeah, and that's, just the estimate too, so.
Missy, stop laughing.
Thanks for that.
I mean, I guess.
But they could,
Yeah, go ahead.
there is a contingency of 10%. I mean, there is a chance that, they come in under this. Trying to be optimistic, you guys.
Sarah and I are confident that we can try and we are confident that we can try to find a bid that is lower or to reduce the scope of the current bid.
What's the amount that you, as the finance committee or Gloria, that you think, like in the spirit of things are becoming more costly and this is a project we're fairly committed to, what's the point at which over is too far over? Like, could we get it are we trying to go within 20,000 over, 50,000 over, 80,000 over? What's the?
I would say 15 to 20. I have a tight budget this year, so.
Are you adding the 30,000 of the shoring up structurally to the 175 budget? And then adding or no? Yeah. So but it sounds like from us, we're saying like, move forward with your creative ideas, go forth and be creative.
Yeah, okay, great. Make
Right?
a motion to go forth and be creative.
Direction.
A whole lot of creativity.
Direction's adequate. Thank
Good luck.
Any opposition to that?
you. Hopefully we'll bring you something
Okay,
in 4 meetings.
thank you. Thanks for working on that. That's another one of those inherited projects that has no glory.
Happy to accept.
You're welcome to leave if you.
We will not be
I've come
offended.
this far.
Not the first time. Okay, well, we're gonna move on to 9E.
Great.
Lucy's still laughing. She's having a great time.
On my bed.
This is the giggly time.
He's like, this is a fun Monday night.
I have a hard time not giggling. Okay, staff is proposed, so the marijuana tag.
Yep.
Staff is proposing the presented ballot language that's in your packet to put on the April ballot to increase the local marijuana sales tax from 1% to 5% as directed in the last meeting. I reached out to each of the marijuana dispensaries, the 3 in town, for their feedback on this ballot issue. I received 2 replies after the packet went out, and these have been forwarded to the trustees. One was concerned that the increased tax would deter visitors from buying in Silverton and they would bring it in. And the other one was concerned since their business has seen a decline in customers, they would see even less.
There was a question on if this could be allocated to the general fund rather than specifically law enforcement, and it can be in the general fund.
Okay, and just to clarify, if this came up in our last meeting and I want to make sure I understand. I think it was our intent in the spirit of the board that we wanted to approve the amount that we would implement as a tax. So to not approve an amount that could be up to a certain number, tonight, what we would be looking at is approving an additional 5% increase.
To ask the voters to.
Yeah, as a ballot measure. But we wouldn't put it on the ballot as up to a certain amount. We would put it as the specific amount of 5% increase.
Yep. That should be reflected.
So to those existing license holders, it's essentially a 4% increase because they're already.
Correct.
Thank you, Jen. Yes,
Well,
while you're on the finance committee.
damn right.
I think it was helpful to get the feedback from the mayor, from the dispensaries. I also heard from several citizens that said, put it on the ballot. I have no problem putting on the ballot. I mean, I just think this is a no-brainer that the town citizens should decide. Like, this is uncontroversial for us. We're not making the decision. Voters get to decide. So that's my opinion.
That's where I stand too, Dana. Put it on the ballot, let the voters decide.
And put it on the ballot at the 5%.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any opposition?
Motion for the approval of the language.
Is there any additional discussion or opposition at this time? Okay,
I think it's great.
then would someone like to make a motion to adopt the proposed marijuana tax ballot language to be put on the April 2nd election?
So moved.
Second,
Okay, roll call please, Melina.
Trustee Edwards?
yes.
Trustee Crinker?
Yes.
Trustee Harper?
Yes.
Trustee Birma?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Yes. Okay. That was the last item on our agenda. We will now open for public comment. If you wish to comment, we'll start with in-person comments and move to Zoom. You can introduce yourself. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Ian Tanner. I was reading today from a book called Winner Take All, and there are 2 paragraphs that just fit this perfectly. For a long time, as I wrote this book, I grappled with the strangeness of indicting the practices and beliefs of a group of people, among them whom I have many friends. I felt an instantaneous recognition when I came upon an old phrase from the poet Czesław Miłosz. In 1953, he published a book called The Captive Mind, about his dismay at so many of his fellow Polish thinkers succumbing one rationalization and excuse at a time to the hypocrisies and repression of Stalinism. He then continues on to say, I am indebted to 2 professors. As I read Thomas Piketty's masterpiece, Capital in the 21st Century, I came upon a line that brought the purpose of my own book into focus. Whether such extreme inequality is or is not sustainable depends not only on the effectiveness of the repressive apparatus, but also, perhaps primarily, the effectiveness of the apparatus of justification. That day I decided my book would be on an inquiry into the apparatus of justification. He continues on to say, my professor at Harvard was perhaps the first to plant in me the thought that money had transcended being currency to become our very culture, conquering our imaginations and infiltrating domains that had nothing to do with it. There was a lot of discussion tonight about land versus money. And I know we live in a capitalist culture. I'm not a jackass. That was wild, where this discussion began so long ago with so many claims and what just didn't happen. Not what did happen, what didn't happen. And I'm kind of appalled at that decision, especially considering all the things I heard people say. And I don't know how to even comprehend what just happened.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ian.
Hello. Yeah, I think that that was kind of a confusing meeting. I know that there was a lot of decisions to be made. But that, again, talking about the time that was put into it for like 18 months and numerous times saying that protecting wetlands was a priority and that once there was an opportunity to do it, it would be done. And it seemed like a simple direction to be like, okay, we can direct you to do this. This is something we think is a priority. And people said that it was, but it's not. And it does seem very much that it's now tossed on to the next board. It's gonna create more, not more issues, but more time for staff because it's gonna almost start over. And then again, that there's applications that'll come forward that got all of this brought to the surface in the first place because it's not necessarily the jurisdictional, it's the non-jurisdictional. So I would have liked to see maybe more discussion and asking questions about the possibility of not a full-on moratorium, but like Dana was saying, like, is there something, is there anything from the mapping that would have told you all anything at all of, oh, we can do moratorium except for this, this, and this, or if you can prove this, this, and this on the non-jurisdictional ones, because I understand that they have to provide that if it's on jurisdictional. It just seemed like that was a missed opportunity that was brought up and then kind of quickly passed over. Because now it does very much make it seem like the last 18 months were like, well, on to the next board. And so that seems just kind of a bummer. And there will be applications, like Jim said, that will come forward, and there will be people from the community that will come in, and there might be those 11 o'clock nights again if it's on a wetland that, you know, is in question. Again, we don't know yet with like the data because that won't be until June. But we already heard from a lot of professionals that do have a somewhat good idea about which ones those are. And so it won't be hard if an application does come forward for the community to be like, okay, we have an issue with this, and then it's just gonna happen again, which is unfortunate. Yeah, and I really appreciate the staff because I know that they're just like bringing the information forward, and then really it's been a difficult time with trustees spending a lot of the time on not having a direct answer. So that's all.
Thank you. Do we have any other would you like any comments? Okay, we'll go to Zoom comments. Melina will promote you to panelist. It's Melanie. Just introduce yourself and the floor is yours.
Hey, am I on?
You're on.
Well, I don't want to rehash a decision you've already made, but I think that getting the Kendall deck done correctly is very important. It's been a problem for a long time. There are a lot of people that use it. Every one of us in town probably ends up over there at some time or another for an event, and we need it to be safe and need it to be done well, especially if there were problems when it was built in the first time and it has to be corrected. The longer you wait, the worse that's going to get. And thank you for all your great discussions this evening. You guys have been fun.
Thank you, Melody. Okay. I do not see any other Zoom comment. All right. The time is 9:28 and I'll adjourn this regular meeting. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, guys.
Bye, Tyler.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Have a good night.
See you, Dave.
Bye, Tyler.
Good evening.